Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to Systems Lab Live. And tonight we have an exciting topic that we are diving into. And here's a question. Has this ever happened to you where you are going and you've inherited this project, you're working on a project, and all of a sudden, you get this calendar notification and it says, ready to review the budget. Now, me, when I received that particular calendar invite, I was pretty mystified, shocked, and overwhelmed. Why? Because I said, I thought we already had an established budget. Well, tonight we're going to figure out and we're going to go through and walk through this 4-phase approach to project budgeting. Now, it seems quite daunting. I know it seems very daunting to be able to create a budget. And for most of us out here, we're already doing so much with even our own personal budgets and our own personal lives. So the fact of the matter is that project budgeting is literally the lifeline to any project. It's just like putting gas in your car to run. Or if you want to get even more technical, you even need a transmission to even help make the engine go and run smoothly for the car. But that's probably for you car heads out there that know that particular analogy. But tonight we're going to be diving into the 4-phase approach of project budgeting. But before we begin, let me ask you all, what are you working on tonight? What are you working on this week, this month? What in terms of quarter 4? I mean, this is quarter 3, excuse me. We're kicking off quarter 3. So what is it that you guys are working on right now? I'd love to know that, and put that in the comments because I'd love to know when all of that and how you all are doing that. So, all right. So we will begin, and I am going to pull up my notes because I have them right here. We're going to get into it. I don't really have a little slideshow like I normally do, but this particular live stream, I like this topic a lot for a couple of different reasons. And one of the reasons is because, many of us, whether we are a seasoned PM, a new PM, you are embarking upon, your project for whether it's the first time or the 50th time, this aspect of project budgeting is nothing really there ain't nothing to play with, really, to be quite honest. And many of you out there, it's like exercising. It's like if you're training for a marathon, think of it like that. There is no real way to get better at project budgeting except for just putting in the work and doing the work. So we're going to start off with just what is project budgeting. And I think it's really important that we kind of outline that, like, what is a project budget? And so what we're talking about here is we're talking about the total cost of all the tasks, activities, and supplies associated with an entire project. And I'd love in the chat if you all would just put in, what is the particular project that you're working on right now? Because one thing that I know for sure is that everything costs money. It doesn't matter if it is if it's a lemonade stand, that's a project. If it's Thanksgiving dinner, if it's a podcast launch, if it is a new service, a membership group, whatever that you are wanting to call your own project, everything costs. And your budget is a tool, and it's a strategic tool that is meant to help to make sure that the budget remains effective, and that the project remains on task. Right? If you run out of money, which many projects do, there are various reasons why that happens. And perhaps we'll pick that up next week when we talk about the aspect of tracking and managing costs and things like that. And so I'd love to know in the comments, number 1, A, what you're working on. B, have you developed your own project budget? And number 3, even any type of tips and strategies that you are utilizing right now. So I'd love to know that inside of the comments. So so a project budget, it's the total cost of all tasks, activities, and supplies associated with an entire project. Okay. So anything that you can think of for your particular project, and we're going to go over a few examples in just a few minutes so that we can get a clear idea of what we're talking about. We're talking about materials, we're talking about technology, we're talking about people, which is supremely important. We're talking about materials, and this could be physical materials as well. So think if you're building a house, that is something that is that's something that we can think about, the physical materials. We're talking about like wood, and we're talking about all the different supplies that it would take to build a building or a house. So definitely you would need to budget out that, and would need to take into account all of those types of things there. It's also and in other words, a project budget is also a spending plan that guides you through the ideation, the execution, and the delivery of your budget. So it's not just a one-time activity that you do. It's not something that you just write down some numbers and you just carry on and manage the project. No, this is something that is a living, breathing tool mechanism. It's also something that's documented as well. We'll go into some tools and some resources that you can use as well towards the end of the live stream, and then we'll most likely pick this back up next week to kind of go into some more examples on how to track costs and things like that. But yeah, so this is your tool, this is your strategy, this is what you'll need as your companion with the project to make sure that it's being run efficiently. And so that's really important to understand about the project budget. And so typically, what's a good best practice that you should do, you should think through, is that your project budget should be finalized before your project begins. You should have a really good set of numbers on what you're going to be spending, how you're going to spend it, and if you're within an organization, and this is a couple of examples that we can kind of think through. So, if you're within a company, you might have a account management team, you might have a finance division, you might have people that are already tracking this type of budget work already. So you as a PM, depending on how your organization is set up, you might be working in conjunction with that team to just figure out the numbers, and whatnot. Now, if you are supporting or leading out an effort within a small business or, an entrepreneur, that might look a little different, but so different. So this might look like a contract where you will be leading out an effort, whether it's you're a service provider, whether you could be doing a podcast launch, you could be an event planner, for instance. And so knowing the budget for an event is going to be instrumental before you, as the event planner, start to go and build out this event and all of the different intricacies of vendors and lights and microphones and things like that. But your client should already have a really good sense of what things should cost. However, this is why um and I'll put a quick plug too, is that one of my podcast episodes with Bree Carroll, it's the I forgot the name of it, but it's called creating meaningful experiences with Bree Carroll. If you go to conversations with askash.com, that's the last one. That's the last episode of the season that you should see on the webpage. But one of the things she talked about was understanding your budget. We talked a lot about having a vision for what you want for an event and understanding all of the different intricacies of what it takes to pull off an event and why budgets are important. She also emphasized too is that you also have to be comfortable, depending on where you are in your business, that you may not have a Ritz Carlton experience, that you may not have that in the cards right now, but that is okay. So you may have a Ritz cracker budget, but see, the thing is that it's all about making the meaningful experiences. So that was a really good episode that I wanted to plug for you all, and yeah, definitely check that one out. But my point is that um, as you are embarking upon your particular project that you're working on, you're going to want to know who's been paid, what's been paid, how you can begin the work, how you're going to allocate the resources, who you might need to hire, software, that type of thing. You're going to want to get a really good sense of what things are going to cost. And so this is not a solo conversation. And that's something I want to point out to you all as well, is that this is not siloed work. This is not you in a corner. So if you as a PM are feeling this nagging feeling, this overwhelming feeling of like, okay, like how would I do this? Like, how would I do this? And so that was my thought when I got that calendar invite that said review project budget. I was like, okay, I must need to do this like by the whole thing by myself. And so, no, you can be the brains behind putting together the framework for it, putting together a draft of it, but you're going to get input from people. So before I get ahead of myself, because that's one of the 4 phases that we're going to be talking about tonight, you should just already know right off the bat, hey, I am not doing this alone. I can't do this alone. You shouldn't be doing this alone. That's not the case. You should not be doing any of the project budgeting alone. Okay. Something that you should know as well is that as when you're putting together the budget, again, this is not a one and done event or something that you do on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. And you say, all right, next week, oh, I don't even know. I don't need to go check it. No, this is an ongoing process. This is something that you track project costs. And so why is that important that you're tracking the cost of things? Meaning who's getting paid, what's being bought, all these different types of things. You want to get a sense of what's being spent and what's not being spent, because you can quickly go from the black to the red. And so projects can get out of control really quickly if you let it, right? And so tracking project costs on a weekly basis is good because it's a proactive approach that prevents snowballing, meaning that things that just keep like a big old snowball, like we're in the wintertime, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And so for us as project managers, it's really going to be important that we track the money, whether that is with ourselves and another individual within a budget or finance team. But this is one of our core responsibilities, is being able to track the money. And one of the quick ways that you can know that a project is not going in a great direction is when the project's overrun, or you can't seem to track where the money's being spent or why certain things are higher one week to the next week, right? So being able to understand that is really important. And again, this is super important to just double down on, is that this is like exercise. This is like when you're looking to get in shape and you're looking to, get your 2-pack or your 4-pack or whatever you want for this summer that we're currently in. You're looking to strengthen your muscles. This takes practice. This takes a bit of, also from a leadership perspective, this is not the time to feel as if you know everything, because if you're not well versed in budgeting or money or finances, this is not going to end well for you, because you're going to be super overwhelmed and it's not going to be put together correctly. So even from a personal story that I can share is that I often work with another individual that's a part of a budget team, and we work together to outline, okay, here's what's being worked on, here's what we need, and there is a process in place, right? There is a process that I have to follow. I meet with this particular individual before the new year starts, and we outline, all right, we are going to need money for this project and this project. And so this is not a situation where, the budget person sits there and writes a check and says, okay, Ashley, go at it. I have to go and put in a particular request. You go in and you review the scope, the objective, what you're going to request, and you put a justification for why this particular project is important, especially when you are working on when there's multiple priorities that a company or organization has. So that is something that's a bonus tip, especially for those that are working in corporate spaces, agencies, and things like that, you're going to want to make sure that you properly articulate the justification, that you know the scope very well. Why is it important that this project is funded? So that's just an extra pro tip that I definitely want you all to sink into. All right, so let's get into what's in a budget, and then we're going to get into the 4-phase process. And so I'm going to have a couple examples too of some projects where you can be thinking about what makes up a budget and what you should be thinking about, especially for those that are leading out projects right now. So what's inside of a budget? We mentioned a lot of these right now, but it's going to be highly dependent on your project. You might be creating a software, you could be a service provider, you could be an online business owner, maybe you have a coaching, consulting, maybe you have a membership group. Perhaps you have a product, whether that is makeup, hair, that could be a digital product, that could be clothing, what have you. That could be graphic design, lots of different types of projects. So when you are thinking about this, and I want to also think about it from the perspective of a couple of things. One, if you are on the service provider side. Two, if you are a PM that is also on a more of a corporate side. So we're going to have a couple examples so that you can see the different sides of how this works. So we're looking at the people, we're looking at the labor, we're looking at materials, meaning what do you need, like materials, whether that is, if you're an artist, for instance, you'll need, maybe software, maybe you'll need, you know, brushes or things like that, a canvas, equipment that could be, laptops, that could be other types of equipment. Again, if we go back to the a building or a construction type of project, we're talking about, drills and saws and other types of aspects of equipment to do the work. You also want to think through, how these resources will be allocated, because typically when we're looking at the budget, we're looking at understanding what's going to be delivered. Like what at the end of this whole thing, at the end of this project, because we're looking at it as a vehicle that's getting to the destination. When we get to the destination, what is being produced? And that's how you have to think about the budget. When you're thinking about, all right, if we are producing an event, if we are producing a podcast, if we are producing and launching a program that is a state agency type of program, at the end of the destination, what are these deliverables? What are these deliverables? And so that is something that we all should be thinking through as we are putting together the budget. So thinking about how these resources will be allocated as it pertains to the deliverables. Any questions that anyone has so far, drop them in the comments, or of course, my DMs are open on both on LinkedIn and on Instagram. I definitely want to get some questions in if you all have them, all relating to putting together a budget. And also too, I think it's really important as well that you understand the timeline of when everything is going to be delivered. When I used to work at a marketing agency, I was not heavily involved in the budgeting process, but one of the things that I observed as I was a strategist, I don't know what they called me, but anyway, they it was a strategist of a part of a team. And one of the things that I observed in the language that they used was that, okay, towards the end of a project, they need to burn hours. That was a term that they would use. Or there was another aspect where, okay, we still have X amount of hours left. We can bring in somebody in to help fulfill this particular need because we are towards maybe the middle of the project or close to the end, and we need some sort of specialist to come in to do this particular work. And so I think that is really important when it comes to the aspect of project burning. And so when you talk about the burn rate, what that really is that's a metric to use to how quickly a project is using its budget or resources over a specific period of time. So I would hear this thing talking about the burn rate. And so that's essentially something that you all can kind of think through as well. What is the burn rate and how that may apply, or maybe it may not apply to your particular project. But usually it deals with the project team. It's making use of time and resources to meet the project goals. So that's what we mean at a high level when we talk about the burn rate. Okay, now we're going to go into an example of what you should consider for a budget. So we're going to go over two examples. One is very popular, so everyone should probably be very much used to it, which is all the rage right now, which is podcast tours. Okay, shout out to all the event planners out there, those that have in-house event teams, or those that have taken on the role of being an event planner for a podcast tour. So here's what you would consider, right? If you are a podcaster and you're just like, okay, I'm going to put together a tour. I'm going to go on tour. What should I consider? So I think a few things to consider for the budget. You want to think through the venue, because everywhere you go, in terms of whether it's a hotel, whether it is some sort of building, that's going to cost you. That's going to cost you. In the comments, what else do you think what would cost to put on a podcast tour? I'm thinking too, decorations. That's also one. Merchandise, whether you already have the merchandise, or you may need to produce more in order to sell at the particular place that you are hosting the podcast tour. Food, if you so choose to. A website, programs, marketing. If you want to have a host for a particular event as well, that's something to consider too. That's something to consider as well. Anything that's related to the experience. So I put that in my notes in quotes, like what is going to make it unique. So you may have something, for instance, I know that there's an upcoming conference in September. I went to it last year, and I got an email from this particular online business owner, and they said they were going to do brand photo shoots while you're there. You can do them in groups. If you're bringing somebody with you, you can do it yourself. You can do them for your podcast. And so anything that you are looking to enhance the experience, put that in the budget. We're going to break down how you would do that in just a few minutes. But I think that's really important to understand, is that what kind of flair are you looking for? It's going to cost you. So you want to make sure that that's itemized, and you're going to make sure that you have that understanding. So another example that I think is really cool is that when we look at, for example, any type of local, state, or federal programs that are out here. Many people think, oh, well, if the government is providing this particular resource, it doesn't cost anything. Like it may be free to you, but it's going to cost. It's absolutely going to cost. So I looked something up really quickly, which is my Brother's Keeper Community Challenge. This was during the Obama administration, and this was a statewide national initiative where one of the things that they did is that they had a My Brother's Keeper Community Challenge, which had 7 states. They had an independent private sector support for grants and in-kind resources that doubled to more than 600 million. And that was something that was done a few years ago. That was about around 2016. That's what it was doing. So with that, and I'm going to break this down for some examples of some projects that were done, some programs and initiatives, is that there was an MBK School Success Mentor Initiative. So it was a partnership between the Department of Education and Johns Hopkins University that will pair 250,000 6th and 9th graders with trained mentors in 30 communities that accepted the MBK Community Challenge, a full-scale At full scale, when operating in grades K through 12 across districts, the model aims to reach over 1 million students in the next 3 to 5 years. So let's take a crack at, or let's break it down about what that even particular initiative would cost. Like, what would you put in a budget like that? Like, so let's look at that. So, for instance, they're already talking about this. There's this partnership. So they're with trained mentors. So, number one, let's think about the training program that they're going to do for the mentors. You want to think about who's going to do the training. You want to think about how the training is going to be developed and the cost of that. So you may hire a few people to develop a training program, and that's going to be again launched within 30 communities. You also want to look as well as that there may be curriculum that's also developed for the sixth and the ninth graders as well. So there's a cost for that as well. So any type of software, any type of materials, there may be MBK t-shirts, or there may be other types of backpacks and things like that. There may be kickoff events that are resources that will be allocated to the different communities. So you want to start thinking through, all right, now that we have this money, how are we actually going to spend it? What are we going to spend it on? And how are the resources going to be allocated? How are they going to be allocated? So, and another example they have is more than 70,000 national labs in 20 states open their facilities to more than 3,500 youth in nearby neighborhoods, including MBK Community Challenge acceptors, for an inaugural MBK and Council on Women and Girls National Week at the Labs. So let's think through what exactly that would take just in terms of a budget. So we're also looking through, all right, so we're looking at the 70 national names. So let's look at the operations of that. What actually would happen at their facilities? What materials would they need? That's something that their operations director or whoever would be in charge of that, they would have to go and talk to who's at each of those sites in those states, looking at what the resource that they need, the materials, the people, everything, especially if you're having a week-long initiative for the MBK challenge acceptors. So I think that's something that's super, super important to look at and to understand. All right. And I will go through one more. And we had, all right. We have let's see, Philadelphia, in Philadelphia. So they had something called place-based state and local engagement. So Boston, the mayor's mentoring movement has reached 90% of its goal to recruit 1,000 new mentors. So even thinking through that initiative, and also Philadelphia's 10,000 teens and young adults were hired for jobs and internships as a part of the 2015 Summer Jobs Challenge. So thinking through what you would put for that, there's also aspects to communications, social media, any type of, if even for, if you fast forward even today to even look at the model and what the My Brother's Keeper has done, someone might say, hey, let's launch a podcast with this, right? Because now podcasting is all the rage. And so that would be something to think through. What equipment would you need? What sort of supplies would you need? When we're looking at it from the perspective of recruiting 1,000 new mentors, there's a whole media campaign for that. So what would you need for that? Maybe there's a budget for marketing. So you would need to put that inside the budget. So start thinking through, in terms of your own budget, thinking outside the box as well, on things that you might be looking at in terms of your budget and the needs that you have for your projects. All right. Last but not least, we are going to go through the 4-phase framework for project managers. We're going to go through this budgeting framework, and we've already addressed a lot of this, but we want to kind of walk through it and put it all together. We're going to put this all together. So phase 1 of this whole process is set project objectives and review the scope. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to look at the project objectives and the scope. So that could be something that is already documented in the project plan. You'll want to find that scope of work statement. You want to find where that is located, and you'll want to review that. That's going to tell you everything, almost everything that you need to know in terms of the deliverables, in terms of the focus of the project, the who's the audience, who's it for, what you're actually creating, what you're actually producing, what are the goals and the objectives of what you're doing when it comes to the project. And that's really going to give you a really good sense of where to start in terms of thinking through, okay, man, as I'm looking through the project objectives and the scope, now I'm getting a better sense of what things are going to cost. But you have to dig deeper, right? That's just the first phase of it. When you are doing that, what you're going to look at is you're going to look at identifying what is required. So what's required? So what do we mean by that? We've talked a lot through that tonight. You're going to look at team members. Okay, who's actually doing the work? Are you going to Do you have salaried staff in-house? Do you need to hire additional contractors? What about procurement? Maybe you need to purchase equipment, tools. Maybe you need to research the best tools and products to use. Training. Is there any training that's needed? Does staff need training? Equipment. Again, if you need extra software, computer monitors, internet service, things like that. If you need space, physical space, think about that as well. Any type of research that you might need, any professional services that you may need. You may need to hire external experts, legal, marketing consultants, if you need to travel. And so this is where, as you're putting together your budget plan, as you're talking through your stakeholders, the decision makers, this is where you'll need to advocate. You're going to need to advocate for what you need, because this is about project success. You've already identified the project objectives and the scope, so you know what you're producing. And so as you're looking through identifying what's required to get it done, you'll really want to look at it from a technical perspective. You'll want to look at it from a technological perspective. You want to look at it from a people perspective, materials, all different facets, marketing, all different aspects, operations. So you want to look at it from all different angles of what's required to get this project done. And so when you're building out your budget, that's what you're going to want to look at. Then you're also going to want to identify these deliverables as well. So when we're looking at identifying what's required, the deliverables is also a part of that as well. So again, the vehicle, you're in the car, you're driving, and the vehicle is getting to the destination, which is the deliverable, which is whatever it is that is being produced. So you know that because you've looked at the project objectives and you've looked at the scope statement. So thirdly, what you'll want to do too is now you'll want to create the budget. Now you'll want to estimate what things are going to cost. So you're going to assign a number to the budget. So for instance, when we go back to our podcast tour example, we go back to also our federal government program example as well. But when you think about something like a mini podcast studio, you're going to want to do some research and think through, well, maybe you need $5,000, maybe it's $10,000. You're going to want to estimate how much that's going to cost. Especially, and then you want to also start making, and this is just a little strategy thing, where as you start building things out, as you start talking to your decision makers and those that are writing the checks and whatnot, you will also want to start thinking through, all right, do we need to cut anything? Do we need to cut anything back? That's also going to be a question that's going to be asked. So if something is a little more expensive, maybe they want to go all in on that. It all just depends on, what's the focus is, especially when it comes to the project, the objectives in which you're looking to accomplish. So you want to estimate the cost. You want to estimate not in a way of like, oh, I think that this is what it's cost. No, you want to get really, really close. You want to get pretty exact to what you're looking for, especially, food, beverages, the location and the venues, everything from the rental hours, all the way from 1 day to 2 day to half days, and everything in between. If you're going to be doing goodie bags and things like that, you're going to want to get, you want to have all of that almost to the T. You want to have that pretty close. And then lastly, what you want to do is you want to get buy-in from team members and your stakeholders. And that might be your directors, your C-suite executives, CEO. You want to get buy-in. And what I mean by getting buy-in is that you'll want to ensure that they are involved in the process of creating this budget, meaning that you want to make sure that they understand what's in the budget, how much things cost, and that the things that are inside of the budget make sense and that it's reasonable, and that is what is going to really help make the project a success. So those are the four items. Number one, which is setting the project objectives and reviewing the scope. Number two is identifying what's required along with the deliverables. What are you producing? What's required to get it done? Um, creating the budget plan, which is assigning a cost and making sure that you have a really good, solid numbers to document too. I also want to make sure I throw that in there. When you're creating the budget plan, you're documenting this, and that could be a few different ways. You could do it through MS Excel, Microsoft Excel, Google Sheets. You could also do it through your project management tool as well. And also, lastly, getting buy-in from your key stakeholders, your directors, your C-suite, your other directors and CEOs. So those are the four. Those are the four things. If you have any questions, please let me know. Please let me know. Send me a direct message. I would love to chat with you about project budgets and how you can make it super easy to put together. Next week, we'll probably continue. We may continue this discussion and maybe combine it with another topic, but we may want to look into this aspect of tracking project costs and what that would look like. All right, everyone. This has been a blast. Thank you all so much. Be sure to share this live stream with about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of your favorite service providers, online business managers, small business owners, other project managers, because this is the necessary information that we need to be successful. So see you all soon. Bye-bye.